Hey, this is Ramon, channel is Alpha 4. Please like, please subscribe, please click that bell, and let's get into the review. I see the ember of passion burns in you. I am grateful for whatever wanderings or curiosity has brought you to this channel, my good friend. Please sit and let us talk of a story. Which story, you may ask? Why, Frankenstein, of course. Yeah, that's how they talk in this book. All right, this is going to be a book review. Sorry about the audio quality, but my mic broke again. What do we know about Frankenstein going into the book? Well, we know that he's a monster. We know that there's a guy named Igor. We know that there's a bride. We know that it takes place in a castle. We know that peasants attack the castle and chase the monster with pitchforks and fire. We know that the monster is scared of fire. We know that the monster is dumb or has something wrong with his brain. And we also know that the story ends with Frankenstein and his monster fighting to the death atop the world, either at the North Pole or at least in the Arctic, if not on a glacier near Alaska. That's what we know, right? Except none of that is in this book. And then there's another problem, which is which Frankenstein are you reading? Because it turns out there are multiple versions of Frankenstein. There's the one by Percy, there's the one by Mary Shelley, there's different iterations with different wording, with different endings, possibly. Who knows, right? The new Prometheus, is that what you're talking about? Are you talking about the one that's shorter, that's only 2 volumes instead of 3? Like, there are all these kind of different iterations of the story. So all of that affects what you think of the book. So is this book worth reading given all of that? Oh yeah, it is. What is the book actually about? If it's not about a monster who's dumb and slow, it's actually about a powerful being, a perfect being, created from perfect humanity, from the best of humanity. And it is so perfect that it is grotesque and ugly to look upon. It is horrible to look upon, horrific, grotesque. What about the tragedies of both Frankenstein and the monster? Well, they're not as intense as it is in some of the movies or in some of the lore. In actuality, some of the incidences are quite minor in the beginning. And it's also a story told within a story told within a story. You have one narrator who's the captain of a ship relaying the things that Frankenstein said, and then Frankenstein is relaying the things that the monster said. So it's not as simple as just one story. It's actually 3 layers deep. So you're 3 layers deep in. There's a lot of meta narrative. The language is beautiful, but at times that also limits the book because it makes all the characters sound the same. The characters that are supposed to not be as intelligent are just as fluent and just as elegant in their speech as the next character, which does hurt it when one of the characters is supposed to be unlearned. The way that the monster learns is just way too quick. It's completely unrealistic how quickly the monster catches on. The monster is fast and strong and very capable. The doctor is not quite as brilliant as he is sometimes portrayed. He's in love with history and he's a little flighty. He's also in love with his cousin. There is a lot of stuff here that in modern times we might read into it, such as there seems to be some latent homosexuality spread out throughout the book. That's not really there. You can read that in, but it's not actually present in the way that it was presented at the time. Also, a lot of people like to read in a kind of mother complex, a dark mother complex. That's not in here. This is a story about father and sons. There's not a mother aspect to this, as much as some people try to put a feminist accent into the aspects of the story, but it's just not there. It really isn't. I know Mary Shelley's a woman, but that has nothing to do with the story itself. There's even like Some people try to imply that there's some type of story point having to do with the sufferings that she went through with her own children, being that she miscarried. You don't really see that here also. You just don't. It is a very beautiful story, a very powerful story. It's about perfection and how perfection can become grotesque, how obsession can destroy a life, what brings meaning to life. She herself, Mary Shelley, is actually using Paradise Lost to compare Frankenstein with. But while that story influences the story, the parallels are not so direct, although at the very end, they really do
become obvious.
So what is the story? The story is Frankenstein creates a monster, and that part is beautiful. But it actually starts off with a ship captain who's just writing in his journal. He's writing letters to his sister. And then it turns to Frankenstein, and Frankenstein's chasing the monster. Then it turns to the monster and the monster's first experiences. And then it changes to the fate of the ship and the crew, and it actually reminds me a lot of Dracula. Very much the same format, where the Dracula is journals, here it is letters. Every chapter is a different letter. And outside of the meta-narrative and outside of the interesting points, like for instance, Frankenstein goes back and changes some of the letters, just like Percy goes back and changes some of the writing, some of the word choice. Outside of the meta-narrative, the book itself is beautiful and elegant and has a strong message about responsibility and about nature and about examining nature versus nurture, and how the monster has a good nature, but the way that he's treated, the nurture turns him into a monster. And the monster is a monster. It's not like how a lot of the modern interpretation since the 60s has it, where he's just misunderstood. No, he's a straight up murderer. He's a killer. And he does some evil things willingly and knowingly. He's not being suckered. He doesn't have something wrong with him. He willfully does evil deeds out of anger. So no, he is a villain, but he doesn't begin that way. He doesn't begin a villain. Some of the nuance that's in the book that is very beautiful is lost. That subtlety is lost in many of the movies and TV series, and even entertainment that simply alludes to Frankenstein. Never quite captures the depths that are expressed in Frankenstein. And the great ending that we all are familiar with, the two fighting to the death on top of a glacier, never happens. That is not in the book. Frankenstein, this is a spoiler, Frankenstein dies before he ever sees the monster. And there's a whole part of the story that has to do with an unreliable narrator, where you doubt whether the monster is even real. It could just simply be a figment of his imagination and his guilty conscience after Frankenstein himself kills his younger brother and kills his best friend. You don't know. You're not quite sure if he's simply lost his mind or not. That tension, that mystery is lost in most of the movies and comic books. It's simply lost in the modern retelling of Frankenstein. In fact, until the very end, until the captain himself, after Frankenstein's death, sees the monster, you're not really sure the monster even really exists. So it's very interesting, it's very beautiful, it's very deep, it's very dark, it's very self-examining. It almost touches philosophy more than it does simple entertainment. It is beautiful, it is dark, it is obsessive, and it's quick. It's a very short book. So if you haven't read Frankenstein, I recommend you read it. I give it a 4 out of 5. Go buy the book. Please like, please subscribe, please comment down below, please ring that bell, please reply. Write a letter, start a book,